broadcasting from the studios of AM 950 KTNF, the progressive voice of Minnesota, and airing on WCPTA 20, Chicago's Progressive Talk. Welcome to the Gailey Show, the only daily LGBTQ radio news and talk show in these United States. I'm your host, John Parker. It is Friday, and we end our weeks talking about culture and entertainment for a number of reasons, one of which is that LGBTQ artists, writers, filmmakers, and theater makers are one of the most censored groups in America today. So every week we want to do our best to lift up their work for that you can read, watch, and attend if you're in Minneapolis and or Chicago. So what is on the show today? Nicole Disney's newest novel, Tapout, came out earlier this month. It's an LGBT plus sports romance and a follow-up to her award-winning book, The Clinch. She'll be here to talk about it. But up first, Ilana Masad is a novelist and book critic. You've read her work in The New Yorker, NPR, The Atlantic, Catapult, and BuzzFeed, and many more. She is the author of the novel All My Mother's Lovers and the just out this week, Beings. All My Mother's Lovers came out in 2020. It was on, let's just say, a lot of best books of 2020 lists. New novel, Beings. Also, you can catch Ilana in conversation with Jordy Rosenberg on This Queer Book Saved My Life, hosted by yours truly. And that episode dropped earlier this summer. You can find it everywhere you get your podcast and at thisqueerbook.com. Ilana, welcome to The Gailey Show.
Thank you so much, John.
All right, Ilana. Ilana, what are you trying to do to me? I'm just here trying my best to survive the hellscape, and then you come along and you're like, no, you're going to feel feelings. Gorgeous book cover. I'm trying to hold it up for our folks on YouTube. Okay. A retelling of the first alien abductees, and then a lesbian science fiction writer in 1960s Boston, and then in the present day, a character known as the archivist who's just trying to make sense of their own life and basically falling in love with this past that they're researching and archiving. Tell folks what is happening here.
Well, it's a book about alienation and aliens. It's a book about archives. It's about yearning and the desire to connect. And it's about loneliness and the ways that we can assuage loneliness, which is so often simply by having community or people who can understand us, right? It came to me really from learning about the first alien abductees, the Hills, and one of the reasons I think that they resonated with me so much was because they did not seek publicity for what they went through. They were basically outed in 1965, and I just thought that was fascinating. Because, like their address was printed in the newspaper, which was also what would happen if you were a gay person who was arrested at a gay bar in the 1960s. Your name would be printed, your address sometimes would be printed, like your boss could find out easily, you could be fired. And so just this notion of outing around something that people think makes you crazy felt so relevant to me and to us and to our people and our queer community.
So you start with Barney and Betty Hill, and right off the bat, I hope I'm not giving anything away because it's literally the first chapter. Yes. They're driving along, and when they encounter a UFO, and I loved how just grounded that scene was, and how you're just sort of the psychology of them just trying to figure out, like, no, this is what this is. No, this is what this is. You know what I mean? They're sort of, you're just walking us through each moment there. Like, it wasn't sensationalized at all. And it really kind of it built up this tension as you're going along. And I'm like, woof, what a way to start the book. But then you kind of get into okay, what next? Like, who do you even tell about this? Because they, as you lay out for us, they weren't seeking publicity here, but you're doing a retelling of their story. So tell us about that.
Yeah. So I first, learned about them from a podcast, and then I started doing my own research, and they have a Wikipedia page, and of course people have written about them and have podcasted about them and have made shitty History Channel series about them or mentioning them. Oh, swearing, is swearing okay?
We'll bleep that out.
Great.
It's
Sorry.
already getting bleeped out for people listening right now.
All right, great. Sorry. Yeah, so I was researching them, and then I found out that they had archives. So the University of New Hampshire has boxes and boxes of their stuff, and I started reading through it. But in finding out that they were outed, right, that they really did not seek publicity, but then once they were outed, they contacted a journalist, John G. Fuller, who was already writing about UFO sightings in their area. The Exeter incident, or the incident at Exeter, is the book that he was writing at the time. And he ended up writing a book about them with their cooperation. And so there's like, their words are verbatim in the book, like it's a lot of it is interviews. And then some of it is the transcripts of their psychiatric appointments where they were getting hypnosis therapy. And I just kept thinking about the fact that they were used in this way by the public, right? Like they were laughing stocks, but also such a sensational kind of story. They were outed literally the week before Halloween. Like it was in a 5-part series. So it feels very clear that it was, the equivalent of clickbait today, right? It was like, ooh, look at this UFO story, spooky, right before the spooky season. But I didn't feel like I could tell their story specifically. And that's part of the tension that I try to grapple with in the book, because of course, anytime you write about anyone else, you're inventing, right? I mean, any story we tell about anyone else, where it is going through our own minds, our own interpretations, our own psychologies. Everything affects how we tell a story. And so I was very nervous at first when I started writing this, and just felt like I really couldn't. And for quite a while, I was in a lot of sort of my own psychic pain about whether I could or couldn't, should or shouldn't. And finally, I decided, okay, I'm going to write into this feeling, into this question. And so that's kind of how I arrived at the novel's first line, which is, this is how I like to imagine them. And then I added another layer of distance by having not me be that narrator, but having another character be the narrator who is narrating those sections. And so I just wanted to grapple with what it means to tell a version of a story, and to realize as you're going that you are embellishing, you are inventing, you are making them your own. They become your own. And so while I hope that that if they could read it, they would see it as an act of love, I can't know, and that's part of the terrifying reality of having a book in the world.
We're talking with novelist Ilana Masad, author of the new novel Beings, out in bookstores and on bookshop.org this week. I also love is it breaking the fourth wall or asides that you give to the reader of the narrator, sort of going, okay, this is why I'm making the writerly choices that I'm making and telling their story. And I really appreciated that. Speaking of writers, then you also have Phyllis, who is, and we get to know Phyllis through a series of letters that she is writing to Rosa, who was her, okay, this isn't the first letter, so I hope that it's pretty obvious that it's her best friend and most likely, first love.
Yes.
And we ultimately get a lot of her life that we're reading through these letters to Rosa. The first question, though, that I have to you, because I've had maybe too many writers come on and go, I've been researching the 20th century, like the 20s or the 30s or the 50s, and basically nothing's changed. And so when you were getting into 1960s Boston, was it the same experience for you?
Well, yes and no, right? Of course, some things have changed, right? While many of us, I think, agree that gay marriage is certainly not enough and was never maybe the only sort of right we wanted to hang our hats on, it does exist now. That is something that people can do, which is great, which of course they couldn't do then. We no longer categorize being gay or lesbian as a mental illness. However, of course, now we're in a time when
Half of
trans
America
issues,
doesn't.
half of America doesn't. Okay. But like, what I mean is like the DSM no longer has
Right.
homosexuality listed in it. You know, like psychiatrists don't think it's a mental illness. But of course, now we have all of this media saying that transness and gender identity or gender dysphoria, that all of these things are mental illnesses and that they need to be cured, but like not that way, not by giving people what will help them, right? So bizarre. And so like in some ways, of course, things are different, and in some ways they're not. What I will say is very different, at least in an urban setting, right? Is that now we don't have to hide quite as much in like centers, in what we now would call like blue or purple urban centers, by which I mean our gay bars don't have to be hidden behind some facade. They don't have to be papered over. The window doesn't have to be papered over so no one can see inside. Maybe that'll change again. I don't know. But and you know, we have the opposite problem, right? Where so many gay bars are closing simply because queer people feel fine going to regular bars, right? We don't always need our spaces in the same way we did, which is this kind of weird double-edged sword.
Yes, this is all paralleling what I've been hearing from other authors. I have to fit in a break here. We're going to have more with Ilana talking about their new novel, Beings. Before we take that break, I want to share with you about our travel partner, Travel Marquette. And the reason why is that I have been going to Marquette County in Marquette, Michigan for the past decade. Part of the reason why is that when I go there, I don't have to worry about traveling while queer. In Marquette is a university town, super blue city, reliably blue county, very active pride organization there. And Marquette has all the things that you want to have in a long weekend getaway, like good restaurants, excellent bookstores, relaxing hiking, time out in nature. It's a place where I can go and refill my cup. And if that is something that you would like to do, and you can also hear my conversation with the CEO of Travel Marquette that came out earlier this week as well on Tuesday. You can go to travelmarquette.com to get your journey started. And you can join me there in October. I will be there for the Fresh Coast Film Festival. We're going to take a break. You're listening to The Gaily Show on AM 950 KTNF, the progressive voice of Minnesota, and WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk. Welcome back to The Gaily Show. I'm John Parker. We are coming up on the bottom of the hour. Ilana Masad is with us. Ilana is a novelist and book critic whose new novel, Beings, dropped just this week. I also want to, because I love that Phyllis, we get the story through letters, and there's this whole lost art of letter writing. And tell me about the writing of that, because it's so captured beautifully, but also I'm like, oh, remember letters?
I mean, of course, right? Like as a writer, I'm a romantic at heart. I love letters. I love the idea of letters. Do I end up writing them to people? No, but I would like to. But yeah, I mean, you know, letters were how people communicated, right? And so you want to be able to get someone's personality in there. But of course, Phyllis is also, she's sort of walking this line of both trying to maintain an intimacy with her once girlfriend, and also trying to kind of front a little bit, at least at first, because she's sort of trying to hide from her how rough things have been for her, or how emotionally difficult it is to live alone in a city where you don't know anyone yet, and you're just sort of trying to make your way. And so it was fun when I was writing it to try to sort of go between, to sort of change tones with her, you know. But it felt to me like the most, like the way that it would make the most sense to tell her story, because she has no one and she is trying to reach out for connection, even if that intimacy is not reciprocated in the way that she would like.
I also just a nice touch of she's like, I forgot all my high school French, but why do I always remember it when I'm writing to you? That was just such a lovely touch. All right, the archivist, no name, just the archivist.
Yes.
Why?
Well, the archivist was originally a whole different, much bigger character and part of the book. And I, for various reasons, could not sell the book that way, had to sort of change what they were doing and how they were appearing in the book. And I was inspired kind of by other novels that use these kind of slightly mysterious narrators or characters to sort of thread together other storylines. And so when I was starting to write The Archivist, I made this rule for myself that I wouldn't write for longer than a page. Every one of their chapters would only be about a page, which is, I mean, in the printed version, it looks a little different, but it sort of managed to stay somewhat like that. But the reason they don't have a name is, I think, because at this point in their life, they don't have many connections. Or they don't have many connections, they think. I think that they are much more connected than they are able to see, because they are kind of stuck in their head. And because their role in the novel is the archivist, like that is what they are doing, and that is part of how they have shaped their identity. And so that's part of why they don't have a name, and also because the name of the original character is very dear to me, and I'm still hoping that I will get to write something about that original character.
And they sit in for us also, because I mean that anonymity, because they are reading Phyllis's letters that have been donated to the archive, and they are reading Barney and Betty's story, and then approached by a documentary crew that are like, you went through a UFO experience, and they're like, say what now? What are you talking about? And they're like, there's footage, and what? Which is a wild part of the novel as well. And I don't want to give away too much of the plot here. We are talking with Ilana Masad, whose newest novel, Beings, came out just this week. Something I do want to talk about is we're living in a time when basically half of America has decided to give up on facts. And according to some really disturbing research, are actually bonding over the conspiracy theories and sharing them and creating them and, making them worse. In your novel, you're exploring this line between fact and fiction. Tell us about that and what you discovered.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I discovered something. I think that what I mean is that the novel asks a lot of questions, right? And I think that I answer the ones that are relevant to the plot, but there are a lot of questions that are not answered because I don't know how to answer them. Something one of my favorite authors, Helen Oyeyemi, said once in an interview that I did with her was that she was always sort of testing stories to see what are they made of, and are stories our friends or our enemies? And that has stuck in my mind ever since, because the thing is that I understand the appeal of conspiracy theories. They're great stories, right? And we as human beings, we are storytellers. We like stories. We need stories. It's how we understand our lives. It's how we understand our day-to-day. And so the appeal of conspiracy theories is very clear to me, just like the appeal of beginning to believe in, whole races of aliens that have already visited Earth and that maybe are, I don't know, hatching eggs in the Arctic, or, I mean, who knows, right? Like there's so many conspiracy theories. There's so much to this world. And I understand the desire for a good story. And so that's one of the things that I'm questioning is like, well, how far do we stretch belief, right? Like, I am very willing to believe someone's own experience. And that's part of what I was reckoning with in the book was me coming to believe what had happened to Betty and Barney Hill as being something that they entirely believed happened to them. And whether I believe in it or not doesn't matter. And so, but how far can we push that, right? Like there have to be limits right? And if not, then like, what is reality itself? And of course, there's the heady theoretical thinking about this, and then there's the material reality in which there are conspiracy theories that are legitimately materially, physically harmful to people. And that to me is one of the places where we draw the line. Because believing something happened to someone one night, that doesn't harm anyone. But believing that vaccines are dangerous is a real legitimate harm.
The Tylenol.
Or Tylenol.
Yeah. The book is Beings. We've got a link in our show notes and on our websites, am950radio.com and heartlandsignal.com. Just look for today's episode where you can check out our Blue Sky as well to buy your own copy. You can connect with Ilana at Ilana Masad, Masad.com. Also, subscribe to their newsletter at buttondown.com/I, like the letter I, Masad Critic. Ilana, I wish I had more time to talk with you, but this has been so delightful. Please come back anytime when you want to talk about the world or when you've got a new amazing novel to share with us.
Thank you, John. Thank you so much.
We are going to take a break here. When we come back, we're going to have Nicole Disney. You're listening to The Gailey Show on AM 950 KTNF and WCPT 820, Chicago's progressive talk where facts still matter. Woo! Coming to you from the studios of AM 950 KTNF, the progressive voice of Minnesota, and airing on WCPT 820, Chicago's progressive talk. Welcome back to The Gailey Show. I'm your host, John Parker. It is 33 minutes after the hour. Nicole Disney is an award-winning novelist whose work spans multiple genres of lesbian fiction, but threaded throughout all of them is a curiosity about the underground worlds hidden beneath the ordinary. She published her novel The Clinch in 2021, and it was a Forward Indies Book of the Year award winner. Now she's back with a new novel, Tapout, which is a follow-up to The Clinch. It just came out this month. Hello, Nicole. Welcome to The Gailey Show.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, so Tapout. This may just be the media that I consume. So perhaps just like biased, but I've become so accustomed to thinking about UFC, Ultimate Fighting Championship, as like the premier side of toxic masculinity. But here you give us Layla Moretti, who is about to make her UFC dream a reality. She's literally like one win away from the contract. Tell us about Layla.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, Layla has been involved in martial arts for her entire life, like many people who are trying to become professionals. It's been a formative experience for her from the time that she was a teenager and has really kind of shaped her character. And you see her in The Clinch as the best friend kind of the protagonist of that story. And she's more in a support role at that point. But you are aware that she has her own ambitions. And so coming into Tapout, you get to see her really. Some more time has passed and she's come into her own, and now she is really on the brink of making her dreams come true in the UFC and in MMA. And it's interesting that you bring up that it kind of seems like the height of toxic masculinity, because there is something very real to that. That can be true, and certainly a male-dominated sport, as we see with virtually all sports, the male side gets much more attention, much more money, but at the end of the day, it is an athletic pursuit. It is a sport. Women like it too. And she's just an example of that, of someone who really understands the sport as something that has helped her gain like the character that she does have and has been a very positive experience in her life. The martial arts community is actually a really beautiful one. It is male dominated, but they tend to be a very close-knit family, because you're doing something where you're putting your physical well-being on the line and you're working really, it's incredibly difficult. And there has to be a really deep respect and camaraderie to be in that environment and for it to not be hostile, because you're literally fighting. So I think that martial artists often really do actually go out of their way to be incredibly kind people with their teammates.
See, I love this. This is about like you really, as I've been looking into the writing that you do and the books that you do, you really kind of give us this other side to things that, like myself, I was getting one side of the story. And then also in Tapout, you give us Harlow Hayes, who's running an underground fight promotion empire, and her audience is like out for blood, so to speak. So tell us about Harlow.
Absolutely. So I love Harlow because she is an example of someone who actually originally wanted to be a UFC fighter herself, actually even got into the UFC, was successful in something that Layla has yet to accomplish, but she ended up not making it, not getting a contract renewal. And she's kind of the embodiment of what happens when you do everything right, when you're incredibly talented and hardworking and you actually break through and it still doesn't work out, which I think is an important piece of reality. I see it with artists and athletes all the time, that you can really be dedicated and talented and still not make it in the traditional sense. So she's someone who had to deal with that reality and went out and found another way. And definitely debatable if an underground illegal fighting ring was the best way to do that. But she is someone who was determined and who was definitely a little bit bitter about the way her original fight story went, and went out and found something else. And I think it's really interesting to look at. I enjoy looking at her morally, because part of you really admires that she just decided, okay, well, I'm going to do it on my own then, and found a way to become successful and to support herself and her family, even though she had to go with this very untraditional route. But you've also got the other side of that, which is that it's not legal, it's not legitimate, and therefore it does have a ceiling, and she deserves better than that and needs to figure that out.
So then walk us through and maybe we do this at high levels so that we're not giving away plot points, but walk us through the meeting of Layla and Harlow and the dynamic now of their relationship, because Layla doesn't get the contract. And so walk us through that.
Yeah, that's a tiny spoiler, but you pretty much know that from the back of the book. Layla, when the book
I hope that wasn't a big spoiler.
No, it's not. There's really not a good way to talk about the book without covering that. So Layla comes into the story on the verge of getting a contract. She has a fight that if it goes well, she'll almost certainly get a contract, but it doesn't go well. It goes horribly. She loses. She's humiliated and has to figure out what she's going to do next. And unfortunately, she decides she doesn't think that she actually has it, because she did lose in such devastating fashion. And she's kind of facing a lot of questions around, do I continue doing this anyway? Do I continue to risk my health? Do I continue to put all of my time and effort into this, even though it's paying me nothing? Or do I change direction in life? And she decides she's going to walk away. But then she meets Harlow. So that's the state where they meet, where she's at her kind of ultimate low, and she's decided, maybe this isn't for me. But then she's introduced to this other world that works completely differently with the underground fighting. And Harlow recognizes that Layla absolutely does have it and is an amazing talent, and she's got an underground fight ring, so she needs amazing talent. And there's just an interesting meeting point for them when someone's at their lowest and comes into a new opportunity that they didn't think that they were going to find, and sort of bringing out a different side of Layla and taking things that were maybe her downfall in a more structured world and turning it into a strength in an underground world. So she's bringing out the best in her in a very unexpected way.
Talk to me about depicting the UFC world and the underground fight promotion world, and what were the questions about those worlds that you were exploring as a writer, and how you answered them in the novel?
Yeah, absolutely. So the clinch was very much about the UFC world. It's about structure. The main character, Eden, is she's an instructor in a martial arts school, so you've got the very structured environment there, and then she's also a champion in the UFC, so she's already far beyond where Layla begins her story. So you become very familiar with the UFC world in the clinch, and I wanted, going into Tapout, to make sure that this story represented something very different. I didn't want to just do it again. Even a different story in the UFC felt unnecessary. I felt like I'd covered it. So I'm kind of contrasting the different approaches and the different styles of fighting required, but also the different mental approach required, and just kind of juxtaposing that there's more than one way to do the same thing, and what is lost in the UFC, because you're more structured. There's actually rules. I mean, once upon a time in the UFC, there were very, very few rules, but these days you have to be relatively safe. I mean, you're still fighting, but there's a lot of things you can't do that in an underground ring you absolutely can do. And just kind of looking at how does that change things, not only physically, but mentally, and what is that going to bring out of someone? And in terms of, are you going to be more impulsive? Are you going to be more wild? Certain things that you would maybe going into a fight with a ref and an audience and rules and sanctions, maybe you would approach it differently. And just kind of, what does it even mean to be in a fight? And looking at this as a sport versus looking at it as survival, and looking at it as a profession versus, again, scraping by. Like the people in the underground fighting ring, they're in it because they need to support their families and their lives. And certainly people in the UFC do too, but it's a much more desperate situation. And there's a lot of kind of commentary and insight into what does that mean? Does that make it exploitative? And just kind of picking all those things apart.
I'm here with novelist Nicole Disney, whose new novel, Tapout, hit bookstores this month. How does gender and sexuality play into this world? Because you're dealing with two folks who identify as lesbians. How does that play into the writing of this, if at all?
Yeah, I mean, it's I think of it kind of as a blend. It's like a action romance blend. So you do, of course, get the romance aspect of it is the most obvious answer to that. But as far as looking at the world of MMA, certainly not all the women in it are lesbian, but a lot of them are or have some kind of different sexuality or gender identity. That's very common. And seeing them kind of fall into this world again where male dominated. So you can get a lot of like bro energy between lesbians and straight men a lot of the time, but also how are they making it uniquely theirs? You know, they're not male stand-ins, and they're not women who want to be men. They're women who are tough as nails and come into this world, and they become part of it, and they're really accepted by the males around them. I don't focus on the men a lot in this one. There's a little bit more of a male presence in the clinch because, again, that world is a little bit more insulated. But yeah, I think it's just watching women express violence and physicality is something that we don't always see a lot, and that a lot of people aren't necessarily comfortable with. So showing what that looks like from a female perspective, and that it's not necessarily the same way men approach it. Men, you know, there's obviously a huge spectrum, but it can be very, very much about dominance. And for women, they want to win, but it's got a very different flavor on it. There's a lot of closeness, and they think of it a little bit more cerebrally, I think, a lot of the time. And it's just a different journey, I think. And I think you get to see that without ever necessarily seeing how men handle it. We don't follow that, but you kind of feel the contrast, just like you said, because we have that male version already in our heads. So reading this, you naturally get a contrast.
Talk to me about the writing of the action and the violence of it. Like there has got, is there a technique to doing that and capturing that on the page?
Yeah, I love writing fight scenes. It's one of my favorite things to do, actually. I think because I am a martial artist myself, it's very helpful. I've been in a lot of those situations. I know what that feels like. But even outside of fights, I love writing anything physical. I think those are the easiest scenes for me to write. I fall into it very naturally. And as far as specific techniques, I try to match sentence length and break up the page so that you have a sense of pacing, both visually and rhythmically, things like that. Mm-hmm. And also just making sure that you're very grounded in their body. That's why I chose to go first person present tense on both of these books. It's because it feels so immediate and you're so in their head. So those are some of the writing specific techniques I went about with this, and the rest is just I get very deep in the scene before I even write a word. I'm very much a believer in visualizing, and in scenes like that, it's even more important. And when necessary, a little bit of acting it out is very helpful. Making sure
Oh, yeah.
yeah, like even if you don't necessarily have a partner to do it with you, but like making sure it all works, even if you have to do that with your own body, making sure everyone's got enough hands and legs and they're where they should be, and picturing someone facing you, and just making sure everything is right.
Oh, I didn't even think of that. That's so interesting, because you could do that where you could literally like choreograph it.
Yes, exactly. I think of it exactly like that, as choreography, and double checking it in every way you can, because if you just like get in the flow, like that's a great place to be, but that's when things like that happen, and you read it back and all of a sudden you're like, no, that doesn't work. They were facing this way, or this hand was doing that. So sometimes getting your body involved is the only way to catch things like that.
Absolutely. Oh, I'm glad to know that. I don't know why I'm so giddy to know that. It's very interesting. I have to fit in a break here. We're gonna have more with Nicole Disney about their new book, Tapout, which is in bookstores now. You can keep the conversation going with us on Blue Sky. We're at thegaleyshow.org on Blue Sky. You can also subscribe to the AM950 Radio newsletter. You can head to, my voice just broke there. You can head to am950radio.com, scroll down to the bottom of the page, and you can sign up for that, get more from The Gailey Show and all of AM950 shows. Stay tuned. You're listening to The Gailey Show. Welcome back to The Gailey Show. We are coming up on the top of the hour. I am your host, John Parker. Author Nicole Disney writes to illuminate a variety of underexplored topics, including gang life, domestic violence, drug abuse, poverty, and professional fighting. Through her work, Nicole strives to create strong female leads. Her newest novel, Tapout, is in bookstores now. Nicole, this question is just sort of coming to me as we were talking before the break about writing and choreographing fight scenes. There was one of the films I absolutely adore is Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and I feel like that's not just a regular martial arts movie, rather that they express so much character and dialogue, but through the action fight sequences. I imagine that you're doing the same here and writing that. Can you talk about that? Like, I don't know if subtext is the right word here, but as you are writing these scenes, about that other layer of communication that can be happening.
Absolutely. That's such a good question. And that's such a beautiful movie. But yes, absolutely. Gorgeous. Yes. I know, right? It's stunning, visually gorgeous, the character work, everything. But yes, definitely you're trying to include character traits and emotional states in a fight. And the way someone fights is very much an extension of their personality. So when you're putting someone into a fight situation, in some ways, you're the most yourself you're ever going to be. There's no keeping it together. You're going to be who you are. Like your true instincts are going to emerge. And so when you're looking at someone in a fight and how they're fighting, you absolutely have to be taking into account what their personality is. And one of the main parts of Layla that I really integrated a lot into that was her impulsivity. She's someone who is kind of like bubbly, fun, flirty in normal life, and like silly, but she's also like, she'll shoot off at the mouth a lot. She's kind of impulsive in a lot of the things she says. So you take someone like that and put them in a fight situation, and I wanted to make sure a couple of things came through. One, what does that impulsiveness look like in a fight? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Because it can be either. And also just her sort of complex around people not taking her seriously, which has been a thing that's followed her entire life, because she's normally not the most serious person. She's kind of silly. She has fun, which makes her very lovable. But when you're trying to be taken seriously in a combat sport, and people think of you as their goofy little sister, she's fighting that too, and trying so hard to be this strong, invincible person that no one sees her as. So she's not only bringing in her deep desire to win, but she's bringing in all of these insecurities and trying to not only win, but win in a certain way, and just the weight of that, and fighting her instincts, because she's, again, come from this structured environment where being impulsive is a bad thing. And now she's in this underground world where being impulsive is kind of a good thing. And sort of trying to take qualities and see them as a strength and use them as a strength instead of as a negative. And the different people that she encounters, they all have their own styles too, that come from who they are. So it's a lot of fun to kind of take qualities and see how they play out sort of under pressure, because you're sort of amplifying everything that makes up a person. You're putting it in hyperdrive because it's coming at you at full speed. So it's kind of a way to exaggerate character and to make traits that maybe were more subtle come through a lot louder.
I'm here with Nicole Disney, whose newest novel, Tapout, the follow-up to her 2021 novel, The Clinch, is out this month. Nicole, the queer community is at a level of stigmatization in the national conversation that we haven't seen for a very long time. Share with me your thoughts about writing queer romance and queer love.
I can't imagine writing anything else, really. It took me a while to find this genre as a writer. I started off just writing like straight fantasy because that's what I was reading at the time. I was a teenager, and that's what I was reading. So it's what I wrote. And it took me years to kind of just naturally write a story with a lesbian character, because I figured out I was a lesbian, and that's just naturally what I wanted to do. And I remember being conflicted about that, but well, but do people do that? And finding out that, yes, of course they do. And I just remember writing that book was such a different experience. I mean, I love writing in general, and I loved writing before, but when I wrote a queer character for the first time, it was like something clicked. And I think it's a similar feeling, right, to just even figuring out your own sexuality when you finally have that oh moment. Like, that's what it's supposed to feel like. It felt the same way with writing. Like, oh, that's what it's supposed to feel like. And I think we all have that when we're writing our truth, or we're reading something that actually represents us for the first time. So I think that that's incredibly important, and we don't really get to choose our voice. We find our voice. And so to find it, and then to even consider doing anything different, it just doesn't really cross through your mind. So yeah, I mean, I think it's important to write the story that you need to write, the one that's inside you and that wants out. Like, to try to curate it any other way is just impossible. It's not going to come out right. And having the ability to put that out in the world, and it's going to be received differently. You know that your publishing options are different and restricted. You know that you're going to face some backlash. There's going to be people who are not supportive, or who even, get online and are just negative. But in general, I found that that's not been too overwhelming. It does happen, but luckily we have a great community, and we've fallen into it.
The book is Tap Out. We've got a link in our show notes and on our websites, am950radio.com and heartlandsignal.com. Just look for today's episode. You can also check out our Blue Sky as well. You can connect with Nicole at NicoleDisney.com. Find her on Facebook and Instagram as @NicoleDisneyAuthor. Thank you, Nicole, for joining us today.
Thank you.
And thank you, everyone, for listening and or watching. You can keep the gay going all weekend long. On Saturday afternoon is Pride on AM 950. You can catch up with the best of The Gaily Show at 2 p.m., Twin Cities Pride Amplified at 3 p.m., The Illegal Trans Woman at 4 p.m., and then rounding out the afternoon is The Downright Upright Show with Philip Anthony at 5 p.m. On Sunday at 11 a.m., tune into WCPT 820 for Out Chicago. It's Sunday brunch with your gay best friends, Ellen Miller and Scott Duff. And this weekend, John Parker and Jim Pounds will be in Chicago and visiting them live in the studio. So see you on Sunday morning. And until Monday, keep it queer, America.